All right. Welcome to the Heavenly Bread podcast. Guys, this is kind of a special edition. Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it special, but we've never done a remote podcast before. This is the first time. And so, bear with us. We're trying it out. I think you're going to be seeing some more of this down the road, but we are diving in this season to a particular series exploring biblical masculinity, exploring what does it mean to be a man after God's own heart. This is episode 2 of that particular series. So we hope you're following along. If you want to watch the other one, it's on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, all that good stuff. But today we have a very special guest. He's very dear to me. He is a leader at the International House of Prayer, been on pastoral staff, I believe, for over a decade, if I'm correct. I know you've been there for over a decade, but there's a lot of things that I could say about him. But this guy is just, I look at him as a mentor to myself. He's a friend of mine. He's been a teacher in my life in different seasons, and I've enjoyed different ones of his teachings, but even more than that, his fellowship, his wisdom, all of that good stuff. And the guy I'm talking about is Mike Rizzo. Mike, are you here with us?
I am here, and so grateful to be here.
Man, tell us, did I get that right about how long you've been at IHOP? Give us a few, a little intro from yourself.
Yeah, so we moved here actually 15 years ago.
Okay.
So we were in ministry for it's been a little over 40 years now. We've been in ministry. I came here from upstate New York 15 years ago. So, and we serve on the pastoral staff at the Forerunner Church at IHOP KC.
That's right.
Primarily do a lot of relationship counseling, premarital counseling, marriage counseling, teaching, that kind of thing. I
tell everybody that you and your wife are kind of the marriage gurus of the IHOP community. Yeah. We try to be. I try to be Obi-Wan whenever I can, and wax eloquent, give wisdom, and being married for 41 years helps because you're always learning, always growing, and so that's primarily what we do. Yeah. So the Lord gave us a clear prophetic word when we first came here. And so we're just, he spoke to me one day, just said, every army needs a medic. Wow.
Clear as a bell, inaudible, prophetic word the first year that we came here. And that has been the absolute unshakable rock I've been standing on. That this is a pretty big army here, 400 plus full-time staff in this community. And you've been here. So just taking care of the infrastructure, the people that are staffing the 24/7 prayer room, the community, the church. So I live in a lot of foxholes, and I'm comfortable there.
Gosh, that's a powerful prophetic word, and I love how you've taken that and kind of used that as the blueprint or the heart behind what you guys do. And every army needs a medic. That's so true. A little bit about how Mike and I connected. I was in Kansas City with IHOP from 2017 through 21. Left summer of 21 to go down to Dallas and join Upper Room. But it was in my last year that I was there, in the midst of 2020. One day I got a text message from Mike. I knew who he was because, you've got a couple of sons who have been worship leaders there at IHOP in the past and have a lot of awesome worship music out. And you'd been in the community for a while. And, I knew that you had your book, Vertical Marriage, along with other books you've written. So I'm like, I get a text. I'm like, Mike Rizzo. And you were like, hey, man, my name is Mike Rizzo. I was wondering if I could take you out to barbecue. I'm like, yes, 100%. And so next, I think our first interaction, I come out, we were texting and I was like, yeah, let me know what you look like. Cause I actually didn't know. I just knew your name. And so first interaction, I'm getting in your car and we're driving off to barbecue and had a wonderful evening, just kind of connecting and getting to know each other a little bit. But from that point forward, we would get together every few weeks and just kind of started building a relationship. I would come sit on your couch and I'd process out different things in my life, but I would just try to pick your brain as much as I could and soak up wisdom. And so then eventually it was probably 3-4 months into our friendship, you were like, hey, you should join my class, Fathered by God. And kind of explain a little bit about what that class is all about, because you've been teaching this class there at IHOP for some years now.
Yeah, I'm in my 11th year doing this Fathered by God class. So many people are familiar with John Eldredge, who, of course, wrote Wild at Heart, many years ago, groundbreaking book. Biggest question of a man's life, do I have what it takes? And I never actually read Wild at Heart to this day, but the book, the sequel, because I never was drawn to John Eldredge. Even before I moved to Kansas City, he was just like the outdoors guy to me.
Oh, right.
Colorado, outdoors. And I am not an outdoors guy. I don't fish. I don't hunt.
Neither am I.
I don't have deer antlers on my wall, all that stuff. So yes. I was like, just, not drawn to John Eldredge. But when I came to Kansas City, I was really interested in the father heart stuff, because we all want to belong, want fathered. That's built into our DNA. Yeah. And so this book called Fathered by God, I read it. It really rocked me, and I got the video series. So doing a class right now. So my 11th year, do it twice a year. So this is like class number 22.
Wow.
I mean, I just keep doing it, keep learning from it. And it's a brilliant structure of seasons in a man's life that God grows him up in. And he looks at each individual season, and just great curriculum, great discussion questions, and small group time that I really love about the class too.
I think it was such a powerful class whenever I took it. It's how many weeks is it? 10 weeks or so?
8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to dive into that in just a second and kind of talk about that. I figured we would just talk about that topic. I mean, I look at you as a spiritual father figure in my life, and I think you have been to so many over the years. But so I want to look at that kind of topic, if you will, for this episode. And so in just a minute, let's dive into some of that. I'm going to ask you some questions and kind of pull from some of the stuff that you teach on. But before we dive into that, I just want to mention our sponsor for this particular series. It's actually, our sponsor is called Turbo Loans, and a friend of mine named Jason Boley, it's his business. They're located down in the Dallas, Texas area. But basically what this business is all about is helping people from all different walks of life kind of navigate through the area of starting up a business or taking out a loan for a mortgage or something, things along those lines. And I don't know about you guys, but for myself, I don't know that world very much. So it's very important to me to just if I'm going to navigate through that world, I want to have somebody who I trust, who's like, out for my good. And this is like, this guy, Jason Boley, I've led a number of prayer meetings with him down at the Upper Room Dallas. He's a pastor. He's a family man. And so I want to encourage you guys, if this is something you're interested in, you don't have to be in the Dallas area to even look into getting connected to Turbo Loans. Look them up on Google, find them, and I think that it will be helpful in your journey. So anyways, back into our conversation related to biblical masculinity. So Mike, how come, first of all, what made you kind of respond? Because I sent out an invitation to a few different guys related to this series, trying to articulate my heart. I felt like there's a a gap, if you will, in our culture, or kind of a hunger for this conversation related to masculinity. It's happening in the secular world, on the social media world, in the pop culture world, kind of more so than I've ever seen in my lifetime. It's really swung in the last few months. And I'm like, man, I want to get biblically minded, Jesus loving men. Let's have conversations related to masculinity. What does it mean to be a man after God's own heart? And I don't want it to just be young people either. I want it to be, let's have conversations amongst brothers, but let's bring spiritual fathers who into this conversation, who have walked through this thing over the decades and have some wisdom underneath their belt, and so, but what kind of like pulled on your heart whenever I just kind of reached out to you? How come you wanted to join in this conversation?
Well, I remember when I was your age. I'm not sure how old you are now, but you're in your mid-20s, right?
26. Yeah.
26. Yeah. So I remember when I got saved, born again when I was 21.
Okay.
So that's really, I think, when my positive masculinity started. So up to that point, I had a lot of hurts, a lot of wounds in life. I wasn't really fathered. My dad was kind of MIA, hard worker, served in World War II, soldier and all that, hard worker.
Wow.
But he was just gone all the time, working or drinking. He had alcohol issue. Wow. So when I got saved at 21 years old, it was my first experience of really being fathered by Father God. And I just melted inside. I became a different person at 21, just did a 180 in my life. And then at 27, I got married. So right around your age. That could be your year, Nathan, 27.
Hey, come on, Lord.
But and then just, like the first growth spurt in my manhood was being born again, really. And that's usually the cataclysmic for a lot of people, depending on how they were raised. Not everybody, but for me, that was like a huge implosion of love and just new identity, et cetera.
Sure. Yeah.
And then it's an ongoing process in our lives, but it's not always going to be like being born again. So getting married at 27, then having children, we had 3 children pretty quick. So I kind of feel for a lot of age groups. I think I feel for them all. I feel for the things teenagers go through, trying to form their identity as young men, and then in the 20s, getting married. So I guess just seeing what you're doing, which I really, really admire, the work you put in and the vision you have to get the message out and to minister to this generation. So I'm like, wow, I am totally in. So honored to be asked to come into this group. So that's why I'm here. And it's ever evolving as well, because you don't just learn, like I said, 22 times doing this class, right? I learn every time of every stage because you're changing. You're not staying the same as a man. And so you may conquer age 26, but then you got to conquer, 30 and then 32. And, because you're changing, maybe your life circumstances are changing, new challenges, a new you. And so it's so important to be anchored in the fatherhood of God.
I'm only 26, but I look at how different I am from my 20-year-old self. And it's like, it's night and day. I can't imagine someone who, from your position, looking back at the young man that he once was in his 20s, and how different. I'm sure it's different. You probably look at a different Mike every decade. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a portfolio of Mikes. I've absolutely.
I think that would be interesting. Do you think that you could look at hindsight? I don't know if it would be too difficult to kind of think of this, or maybe be too oversimplified. But when you look back at, there's Mike in his 20s, there's Mike in his 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. What do you see? Do you see differences? Could you take us through like here's what Mike was like in the 20s, and then here's what he was like in the 30s. Could you think you could do that?
There's people that could do it very systematically, and you could find them by Googling them. I know. One of John Eldridge's guys, Morgan Snyder, he's got his own, book out now and everything. Good Soil, becoming a king.
Yeah.
And he's talked about what happens in each stage, right? 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember some significant shifts that took place. When you're in your 20s, I mean, for me, it was just looking to make a mark, to get established somewhere, get a good paying job, driving something better than a beater for a car, being established,
Mm-hmm.
And that just to feel like, I have what it takes. I can make it in this life, and getting a base set up more or less.
Right.
And then, of course, when you get married, that shifts a lot of your seasons, right? Because now you're having to shape and mold. And we had a girl and then 2 boys. Now you're responsible for shaping the clay that's in your hands.
Ooh.
God's still the potter, capital P. You're the potter, small p.
Wow.
And you're having huge influence in shaping lives, how they're going to turn out as adults.
Yes.
That's like resting partially on you. It's like, wow. And so the season of my 30s was all about just, raising toddlers and, youngsters, learning about fatherhood while I was still being healed of my own childhood.
Oh, yeah.
And so there were things I remember, making a vow. I remember making a vow I'd never be like my dad. He was an angry man, and he was a very critical man. He didn't give praise or nurture.
Mm-hmm.
While I was growing up. Later on in life, he shifted. When he was like in his 70s and 80s, he really softened up, which was cool.
Wow.
But when I really needed it, right, in the foundational years, he was MIA. So so I was trying to father while still healing. And then I said I'd never be like my dad, but oh my gosh, there were times where I would have the anger and have the rage and I would be like my dad. And that was very scary.
In the ways that you didn't want to be.
Yeah, his anger, like, my dad's an old Sicilian guy, right? He's short little guy, but really fiery. And he would get really angry. He would bite his fist, like just that. It's an Italian thing, I think. and I found occasions when I found myself biting my fist.
Wow.
It was like, oh my gosh. It was like deja vu all over again, like Yogi Berra says. And I was like, wow. Now I am doing this. Oh, so I really started early on to get as much inner healing as I could. I would go for counseling because I saw this stuff. So in my 30s was all about just, I've got to be a good father.
Wow.
And to be a good father, you have to, of course, be a healthy son before God. Those are connected.
Yes.
So, but then at the end of my 30s, when I was 39, I hit a wall.
Really?
Because I was pastoring. I was an assistant pastor in this large church, and I was a teaching pastor. I did counseling. I was all set where I wanted to be. 39 years old, doing really well. And then my boss, the senior pastor, decided that he wanted me to take the pastorate of another church in a nearby city to kind of launch out on my own.
Right.
So he didn't ask me if I wanted to do that.
Wow.
He just said, I feel like God's calling you to spread your wings, go out there and, be your own guy. And I'm like, so he wasn't really fathering me through this. He was just kind of informing me.
Interesting.
So I was extremely PO'd about that. I was not happy. 39 years old.
Yeah.
I could have just quit the ministry and done something else, but I took this pastorate. So I went from a big church to about 30, 40 member church. I was 39 and the people in the church were age bracket of 50 to 70.
50 to 70.
So it's like, I never asked for a nursing home ministry. That was like, wow. This was a major demotion.
Wow.
And then of course, all in hindsight, I see all my pride, like a man of my caliber, like first round draft choice going to that team.
Yeah.
I mean, what a waste.
Yeah.
What a waste. And so there I was in this little church, and God bless the people. The pastor was retiring, and it was an old school type of church. The worship was piano and organ.
Okay.
And I had come out of a contemporary worship experience and state of the art and everything.
Yeah.
And so that was the Lord launching me again into, he was initiating me into manhood again. And that's where it gets kind of dicey, because the way that we would write our script and the way that he writes our script,
usually a lot different.
Yeah, oftentimes. Yeah. So I had to adapt. I had to, step into that role of being the senior pastor. I'm pastoring my own church now.
Do you feel like
it's a small church, but still a big responsibility?
Do you feel like you went through a bit of an identity crisis during that time?
Majorly.
I think it's fascinating that just the age in which you were whenever that happened, because usually about 40, biblically, that's a big transition time for some of our favorite, people in the scriptures. You look at Moses. I think he was around 40 whenever he first got thrown into the wilderness. Is that true?
Wow, you're testing me now, man.
You look at, I know David became king of all 12 tribes when he hit 40. He became king of one of the tribes at 33. But there's, you see something around 40 with a couple different people. I wish I had a few more off the top of my head, actually. I kind of exposed myself just now. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of them. And I'm like, I can only think of two of them, actually.
Sure.
But, yeah, so you're right at about 40, and all of a sudden you're thrust into this new stage. Talk a little bit about, you use this word, the Lord initiated you into this next stage. Like, what do you mean by that? That's kind of like a fathered by God term, language that I hear you use. Just for our listeners, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, you see it in life, right? You see, your son wants to have a paper route, right? We're going old school example now. People are watching. Saying,
oh yeah, okay,
route, right?
Yeah. You might have to explain what a paper route is.
Everything's digital now. It's like paper route. What are you talking about? Pulling a wagon with newspapers in it, delivering door to door. It's like, what? Some area of responsibility that your son wants. He wants to have a car. He wants to get his first car.
Sure.
And so a part of the initiation is him learning how to, put the gas in the car, go to a car wash, take care of it, fixing little things if he's able to, just taking responsibility for something that you've never done before. Right. Being initiated is like a first time doing something, and it's out of your comfort zone. Basically, initiation is, this is not my comfort zone, but I'm gonna try it. So I was being initiated into learning how to love. It turns out I ended up learning how to love because I thought I loved pretty well in my last church that I was at.
Yeah.
But when I got to this little church, it was like all of a sudden the kickback wasn't there. And it was kind of like, a pastoral version of Mother Teresa. It's like, okay, these people aren't going to be able to, these people are not going to be able to give me back a whole lot.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I'm 39, they're 50s, 60s, 70s. There was maybe one or two young families in the church. And I was like, oh my gosh. And there wasn't much room for my career, my advancement. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So I was being initiated into being a servant and just loving people in a way that I never. So, and I ended up being in that church for 10 years.
Wow. So all through your 40s.
It was quite all through my 40s. Yeah. And then I was initiated. Then I was in another season. So I'm like 49 years old.
About that transition.
The church had about that time. Oh man. Okay. This is crazy because next year I turned 69. So, oh boy. All right.
Oh no.
You prophesied it, man, right there.
Yeah.
So the church had done well in a lot of areas. They had been in a lot of debt when I took the church over, like really bad debt. And so the Lord blessed, long story short, we were prospering. Church grew a little bit, but the Lord blessed us with money. It's really phenomenal. We were able to church for cash. And financially, we were great. Yeah. But the attendance dropped.
Okay.
And it dropped to where on a Sunday morning, if I had a dozen people there. And so here comes the question. Do I have what it takes? Wow. There it is. That's always the question. Do I have what it takes? Why am I not able to make this church succeed? And I was being as faithful as I knew how to be. But a part of manhood also is accepting your gift mix. You're like some guys have a strong like leadership mix, inspiration. They could probably grow a church without the Holy Spirit. They're so gifted in that area, just humanly. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So I ended up closing and that's not a resume builder for sure. I ended up closing the church.
Yeah.
Closed it down. I shut it down. I was basically emotionally on the verge of just feeling like I was going to break down.
Wow.
I was crashing again. And, but the Lord was so good. I just took a regular job in the marketplace for like 3-4 years. I just left the ministry and the Lord was showing me in that season, he was showing me, telling me, your value to me hasn't changed.
Wow.
Whether you're a pastor, I was working in a call center, taking phone calls all day long for a bank. And the Lord was like teaching me, okay, you're not Pastor Mike anymore. You lost your handle, but I see you exactly the same.
My goodness.
Beloved, you're my beloved son. You're my guy. You're my guy. I love you.
Oh my gosh.
So those 3 or 4 years, I learned a lot. Once again, being initiated into a new level of like, it can never be about performance.
Wow.
And, my journey is unique. Everyone has a unique journey, but for me, it was like, yeah, definitely it's not about performance because my performance sucked in the pastoral report card. It was horrible.
Wow. That's such a powerful lesson though, that he's teaching you. I'm fascinated at the fact that he's teaching you this in your early 50s. I mean, because I'm thinking about that's something that he hit me hard when I was 24, mid 20s. I'm wondering if you go through rounds of this. I might get a decade or two down the road, and what he hit me hard with in my 20s, and I kind of grabbed a hold of, there's another layer or so that he wants to take me deeper in. He's like, no, Nathan, like you remember when I showed you back when you were 24, it's really not about performance. For me, it was, I realized that so much of my fasting was wrapped up in performance. When I first came to IHOP I grabbed a hold of what we were getting taught about fasting, and I loved it. And I started, I was all in, but what I didn't realize was subconscious, was wrapped up in just a mixture of my motivations, was I wanted to be the most spiritually on fire young man in the community. And I didn't realize how much that was driving so I did, a lot of extended fasts, and it was during 2020. I wasn't in school for that year. And so I thought this was going to be the year I was going to do a 40-day just on water. And I got to about day 10, and I thought I was going to die. I actually thought I was going to die. And I called, I don't know if you remember this guy. His name's Richard Tucker. You remember him?
Mm-hmm.
He was walking with me like very closely in that day. He was on pastoral staff at 400 Church. And I called him. I'm like, Richard, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm going to die. And he goes, Nathan, don't you think you should drink something? It was like a profound, revolutionary thought. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh. But I ended up going to the store. I mean, it was the hardest Walmart run I've ever made. But went and got some carrot juice, came back, watered down the carrot juice, drank some, and I had this encounter with the Lord where I just started weeping, and I felt his delight over me like I never had before. And I felt like this Jesus getting baptized, Father speaks to him moment. And he just spoke to me, Nathan, you are my son, and I'm so proud of you. And for him to speak that in that moment I felt like I was such at a low place. I felt like I just failed at this awesome spiritual thing that I was trying to set out to do. And he steps in, he's like, no, in this place of you kind of falling on your face in this thing, I'm so proud of you, Nathan. It broke this performance thing over me hard, where it actually was pretty hard to fast after that for a long time. It took about a year where I didn't fast at all. And it was so interesting, within that year, people would call fast, 21-day fast, 40-day fast. And I'd be like, I'm not doing it. I know my Father, he's so proud of me, whether I do it or not. And it was a big part of my journey. And, since then I've incorporated fasting back into my life, of course, but it was this, but so for me to hear, it's like you're at a different stage of life under different circumstances, but it's like the Lord's speaking such a similar message to your heart. And I think that's fascinating. Did you feel like too, that the Lord has hit that performance thing at different times of your life? Or was that one in your early 50s? Was that kind of the major one that you look at over the course of your life?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same. I think it's a lot of things we experience in life. I think there's a lot of similarity and repetition. And as you get older, hopefully you kind of learn to tweak things as you go along, so you don't keep falling into the same, Groundhog Day, the same hole, right?
Yeah.
And as long as you don't get caught in the comparison trap and various other things that can just, make you stray, you'll be a lot healthier. Because when I closed that church down, I never told my wife this actually until years later. But when I first took that church, I heard the Lord say, one reason I'm sending you to this church is to give it a proper burial.
Oh, wow.
A proper ending.
That's intense.
Yeah. Because the church was started like in the 1920s. And so here I am coming in 1993, right? The first pastor retires after a long tenure. And I felt like the Lord said that this church has had a good life, a good season, and it's time for it to transition, time for it to end.
Yeah.
And I never even told my wife that. And
Wow.
I kind of sort of forgot about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm working in the marketplace, I'm in this call center in this little cubicle. And one day the Lord spoke to me, inaudible, clear, clear, clear. He said, for now, this cubicle is your crucible. And, you know, crucible is a place of crushing, a place of refining. Crucibles are good. When God's the engineer over them, refining, powerful. And they're usually preparation, because when God takes you apart, his whole plan is to put you back together again.
That's so good, Mike.
But it's going to be with a little bit of a different style. It's going to be more of God and less of you in it. So, so I'm there for 3 or 4 years and answering phones in a call center. In the meantime, our son Justin had come to International House of Prayer. And we're visiting a couple times a year, checking out International House of Prayer. And age 53, I leave that job. We sell our house. We move to Kansas City.
Wow.
But you felt the call to join this house of prayer. And I felt I had the confidence to do it, step out. That's the cowboy stage. That's the adventure stage where you're just like, let's try something new, adventure. We could do this.
Yes.
And so we did it. And when I got here, I hit another wall. Really? And oddly enough, I thought I was just going to coast in at 30,000 feet, just keep flying at that height. And so I realized that I had to be a missionary and raise support. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I knew about this sort of, but now I have to do it. Like, how do you do that?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Here again, we are in initiation. Something different, out of my comfort zone.
Wow.
And so I went out and just got a job. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to start this job, somebody at IHOP offered me a job.
Oh, wow.
And oddly enough, IHOP had a prayer room that you had to pay for at the time. It was a subscription. And they wanted to start a little call center of sorts with a few people to answer phones to handle the prayer room traffic. And so guess who got hired to start this little call center? A guy who had been working in a call center for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Never knowing that experience would ever be any good. Jeez. So my first job was a customer service at IHOP for the prayer room.
Gosh.
And I did that for a year or two. And then I segued into pastoral ministry again. So it's like, what a weird path that we are led on sometimes, you know.
Gosh, Mike, I love that detail because that's so the heart of the Lord to show you nothing is wasted in this journey.
Exactly.
Golly. Mike, I really enjoyed the way that you kind of took us through a little bit of your journey. I know there's so much more to your story, of course, but kind of gave us a broad overview even of the decades and some of these transitional times specifically. There's so much more that we could talk about and that I want to talk to you specifically about on this topic. But I felt like this first episode is so good just to kind of get to hear some of your journey. I think we'll get to dive into more pointed dialogues here in the future because you're going to be back on. I mean, the cool thing about this series is these guys, they're like, hey, count me in for multiple conversations. I want to come on and be a frequent guest. And so we're going to get to have Mike back on the show. We're going to, go ahead and cut it off now. I think we've been going for 40, maybe 45 minutes. I'm not positive, but, so we'll try to keep this episode just to this, guys. But, man, I just want to let you guys know Mike has some awesome resources online. He's got multiple books. We mentioned Vertical Marriage is probably your biggest one. But you have several that you've written, you and your wife both. You can go, if you're in the Kansas City area and you want to go be a part of his Fathered by God class, there's opportunities for that. He does marriage counseling. don't you have a website too that people can go to? Is that correct?
We do. And the quickest way to find us is just my name, Mike Rizzo, and then just the words vertical marriage.
Mm-hmm.
If you just Google Mike Rizzo vertical marriage, it'll pull up. We have an online school, online courses. We have a website with a couple hundred blogs on it.
Yes.
So all of our stuff could be found there.
I love receiving your blogs. You send them out through your email. I read through them every single time. They're always short, little encouraging words. And then you also have some teachings online too. You can get on YouTube if you want to hear Mike do a little preaching, teaching type of thing. There's opportunity for that. But Mike, I want to just thank you so much for coming on and for really just entering into this dialogue with myself and with, everyone who's listening. I think it's so valuable for young men like myself to be able to hear and pull from the journeys of men who have gone before us. And I'm so just grateful for our friendship and for the way that you have just opened up your life to myself and to anyone who would listen. So thank you for coming on today. And I look forward to engaging with this topic and conversation with you in the coming weeks and months.
My pleasure. Thank you, man. Love you, bro.
I love you too, man. Okay, guys, this has been Jesus People, having Jesus conversations to provoke greater love for Jesus. So we will see you guys again next time.